Howdy, Dr. Elizabeth Latham here, and today I'm going to be talking about functional foods and COVID. So there's been about a half a dozen papers looking at diet and immunity and COVID. So we're going to go over those pretty high level. And these papers are all purely looking for connections. So there weren't any interventions, just population level correlations and, looking at it epidemiologically. So, mainstream doctors and scientists are noticing that certain populations are less prone to COVID. So they started looking at their diets and lifestyle, and lo and behold, there were some very strong trends. And this is really hilarious to me that this was even a question, because the food you eat is directly related to your health. But it's not surprising that this is surprising to them. And that's because doctors, on average, receive 24 contact hours for nutritional training in med school. And only 40 schools out of the 106 that this paper looked at met the 25 hours that were recommended by the National Academy of Sciences. So this is just not something that doctors or scientists just have on their mind or have been trained in thinking about. And I'll have a citation list in the description for the paper that I just cited, as well as all the COVID and functional foods documents. I also just wanted to say from a personal experience, I have had this happen to me multiple times. I've had 2 gastroenterologists and a rheumatologist tell me over and over again there was no connection between my diet and my autoimmune disorder. When I insisted that I was intolerant to certain foods, and they would cause a flare-up of my symptoms, which is just insane because certain foods are inflammatory and some are not. Some foods are easier to digest, while others are difficult. So even on a very high level, food will change your disease state. And that's not even thinking about the functional food component, like antimicrobial properties of food, macronutrients, vitamins, minerals, intolerances, your gut microbiome, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But back to COVID and food, rant over. The first study I'm going to look at specifically examined fermented food, which may be protective on a population levels for COVID. Basically, what they found was countries who are known to eat high levels of fermented food, so things like sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, kefir, had significantly lower rates of COVID infection, so that's known as morbidity, and overall had a lower death rate, so that's mortality. Why is that? Why would eating sour, stinky cabbage mean you were less likely to get COVID? Well, so when the SARS-CoV-2 virus, actual virus, binds to your cells, a powerful cascade that leads to oxidation happens. And it's through this pathway known as the AT1R axis. And what ends up happening is it causes damage to the lining of your blood vessels and your lungs. And that's why it's mostly a respiratory disorder, but you have a wide range of symptoms, including the GI tract. So there is a protein complex known as NRF2, and it's pretty much the most potent antioxidant that humans have. And it can directly block this AT1R axis that the SARS-CoV-2 activates. And cabbage contains one of the highest known levels of a molecule known as sulforaphane. And this is a natural activator of NRF2, the pathway that blocks the pathway that COVID activates that causes damage to your cells. Super cool. So this NRF2 pathway, it actually activates over 200 different genes in your body that are involved with antioxidation, anti-inflammatory pathways, and it also detoxifies in that it can facilitate the removal of harmful compounds from your body, leading to really strong, like, overall anti-cancer properties to it. Cool stuff. Another benefit specifically to sauerkraut and cabbage is these fermented vegetables have lactobacillus. So lactobacillus is a really common probiotic. It's also what you find in yogurt and kefir. And it also directly activates this NRF2 pathway. So 2 modes of action on why sauerkraut, cabbage, and fermented dairy products would prevent COVID infection. And it was interesting because this study looked at a lot of different variables and a lot of different co-founders, and it was only fermented vegetables reached statistical significance with a reduction in COVID-19 death rates on a countrywide level. It's insane. And then this is where it gets even crazier. It was also dose dependent. So for each gram per day increase in consumption of fermented vegetables at a country level, the mortality risk of COVID-19 was decreased by 35.4%. I would not suggest that that means that you need to eat 5,000 grams of fermented cabbage every day, because you will get diarrhea. But if you haven't included it in your diet already, now would be a good time to do it potentially. The second factor that was significant with COVID-19 deaths on a country level, but not as significant, was cruciferous vegetables, specifically cabbage, and then another one that came up as positive was cucumber, probably for a lot of similar reasons: the polyphenols, secondary compounds, activation of these anti-inflammatory pathways. And then the third thing was the length of the food supply chain in each country. So that's how far and how many steps does your food go through before it ends up on your table, in your mouth, becoming poop. And if you're getting local tomatoes, or, contrast that to like ketchup, eating local tomatoes would be a really short supply chain, and then eating ketchup would be a longer supply chain. And it hurts me, and I feel like I sort of just threw ketchup under the table, and I love ketchup so much, and I would hate to use it as a negative example, but it can be a very highly processed food. So, sorry, ketchup. And the standard American diet is which acronym for that is SAD. I think that kind of says it all. Is a classic example of a long food supply chain compared to, say, something like the Mediterranean diet, or in Southeast Asia, where they're eating a lot of fresh food, cooking at home, local produce, et cetera, et cetera. So, back to the whole fermented vegetables and milk story. This also relates to your microbiome. So there have been several studies looking at this, where people who had the most severe COVID infections also tended to have low microbial diversity, and this is known as dysbiosis. And basically, these cultured foods include lactobacillus, and lactobacillus, in addition to the benefits we talked about earlier, also enhances the diversity of your microbiome. And we found time and time again is if you have low microbial diversity, it leads to a whole suite of health problems. So anything that you can do to increase that diversity is pretty clutch. So, and then I'm just going to do rapid fire dietary and lifestyle factors that were found to be negatively correlated with COVID mortality and morbidity on a population level. 1, high fiber diet. More fiber, more increased microbial diversity, reduction in weight, more insulin resistance, better immune system. So many benefits directly and indirectly to fiber, especially when it comes to antiviral properties. Next one is vitamin D. I'll probably do a whole episode on vitamin D and sources here soon, but obviously it's a lot better to get it from the sunlight. And if you are going to supplement, make sure that it's a high quality liquid supplement. You can also get it from food, fatty fish, mushrooms, eggs, leafy greens, And lo and behold, all of those things are related to having a short supply chain. So it all kind of comes around. Next thing, exercise. Exercise enhances your innate and your adaptive immune system. So that's the one you were born with and the one that you develop over time. And there is also a dose-response relationship with that. So the more you exercise, the more robust your immune system is. Good stuff. And then, of course, sleep, the foundation of your pyramid. Sleep enhances your immune response. It enables good food choices. Better sleep means you're more likely to exercise, and it's negatively correlated with obesity, which is positively associated with COVID morbidity. So, with COVID, we have all these tools to create like a physical barrier to not getting the virus. But we should also be thinking about diet and lifestyle, both in terms of preventing COVID, but then also as an intervention to treat COVID. And looks like one of the biggest things that we can do is including fermented vegetables and dairy, because they're powerful antioxidants, and both directly and indirectly through the pathway and then also through the lactobacillus that you end up consuming. And then proper sleep, generally healthy diet, exercise, go outside, get some sunshine. That's about it. I think we'll be okay. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and thank you so much. Bye.